So let's jump back for a minute to the term transparency.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between what people think transparency is and what it really means?
Well, a lot of the time when people want transparency, what they really want to do is disagree.
Right.
And they figure that if they can get all the information, then they can start attacking point by point until they, quote unquote, win the discussion.
Right.
And so that's not actually terribly productive. It's not like you're gonna just take arguments of one by one, win them all, and declare victory and change things. Every governance in the world that is effective at all is done by compromise and negotiation and figuring out appropriate middle grounds and where we want, where aesthetically we think things should be. We all have the same sort of vision for Commander. We don't all have necessarily the same belief of how is best to get there. And it's not like I'm going to stand up and declare, this is how we're going to do all these things, blah, 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 blah. I will brook no dissent.
Right.
And so it's not like there's a... Transparency isn't publishing the transcript of our conversation and showing, oh, well, you just got to argue with Toby about this point and Sheldon about this point. That's not productive. The transparency you want is essentially what we have in the philosophy document, where we say, we four aren't necessarily agreed on the methods. And to be clear, we're not like wildly apart or anything. If anybody's getting the idea that we have these contentious fights about how to take things, it's tweaks about how we might want to best approach a certain rule or a certain philosophy. The philosophy
we're in a pretty narrow band between the four of us.
Yeah, I mean, there's some disagreement, but it's not anything like anybody would really worry about. The philosophy document is where we all sort of, and to be fair, there was a lot of discussion about that, but it's our North Star in terms of this is what we're pushing towards, and that's the actual transparency that's important, because that's the document that says we are working towards this. And it's not actually productive or helpful for people to get exact details about what's going on internally to work towards that. And obviously we can have disagreements about that, and we do have disagreements about exactly how to implement it, and that will come as no surprise to anybody who also has disagreements. Where it's important is the people who have fundamental disagreements with the philosophy, because that's where we're saying this is what we believe and we'll be working towards. And if you have issues with the philosophy, that's a sort of more core problem in that, this is why we're building Commander. And obviously, if you want to take Commander and do your own thing with Commander, we will never get in your way.
Right.
But this is the underpinnings that we look at when we talk about, you may not agree with our decision, but hopefully you can at least see why we made the decision based around our fundamental philosophy. If you disagree with the decision because you disagree with the philosophy, that's very different. That's just, you're not on board with what we're trying to do. If you disagree with the implementation because you think, well, maybe I would have done it slightly differently, we probably wouldn't disagree with you. There are always many ways to accomplish something. And in the sort of very soft, I mean, this is not like a hard science where it's like, you take these three chemicals and you do this reaction for this time and you will get this result. We are very much in sort of soft, squishy, division to social science sort of areas. So there aren't definitive answers we have. Is your, and I say your as in the person who has a disagreement, way better? Maybe. And we'll happily listen to people who think that they have a better way of implementing the philosophy. But fundamentally, there's a difference between I have an issue with how you're implementing the philosophy and I have an issue with the philosophy. And I think that's where the transparency is really important, so that people in the latter camp understand that what they want is not really what we want, and that's sort of important to communicate.
Yeah, one of the long-term issues that folks have asked about also has been accessibility. It's like,
sure,
I want to be able to give you my opinion on a thing. The CAG in part was an effort to increase the accessibility, at least of getting people's thoughts to us. We're four people. We don't have an infinite amount of time to, as much as we'd love to spend 40 hours a week talking with people about Commander.
For sure, yeah. I mean, most of us have jobs. that aren't
Right.
content creation.
Right.
And yeah, we would love to. I mean, all of us, to varying degrees, have been or are fairly public figures in the Magic universe.
Right.
Perhaps not necessarily directly for Commander, but like anybody who needs to get hold of me for Magic has ways to get hold of me. There's accessibility where you're available if somebody is willing to put in the work to get in touch and present good arguments or make their points. And then there's available, which is I want the RC to come to us and I demand they show up and listen to what I have to say. And
Yeah.
those are different. I like being as accessible as possible. And I mean, having done like judging and writing the tournament documents for years, I love it when somebody sends me a well-reasoned, interestingly argumented email that's passionate about changing some aspect of Magic policy.
Yeah.
That's great. I may not agree with them. I will almost always try to write back and say, well, here's my perspective on what's going on here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's actually a really functioning way of doing things, because it means that you're getting good feedback from people who actually care to put it together.
Yeah.
I have very little interest in going among the judges and getting harangued about something that some judges got a bee in their bonnet about, because that's just somebody who's got a complaint and not actually is actively trying to make an improvement to what the judge program generally stands for. And this is the same in Command. This gets back to the transparency thing. If you have something where you are passionate about the implementation of the philosophy we have laid out for Commander, and think that there is something there that you would really like us to think about, we're generally pretty accessible.